Masalah perubahan iklim tidak bisa dipandang sebelah mata. Dampaknya bukan hanya dirasa oleh warga Indonesia, namun juga bagi seluruh masyarakat dunia. Sejumlah dampak dari perubahan iklim beragam, mulai dari suhu bumi yang lebih panas, meningkatnya kekeringan, kenaikan suhu dan permukaan laut, kekurangan makanan, hingga hilangnya spesies makhluk hidup. Narasumber saya kali ini akan menjawab tantangan apa saja yang akan dihadapi oleh masyarakat dunia, termasuk generasi muda terkait perubahan iklim. Termasuk upaya Amerika Serikat dan Indonesia untuk mengatasi permasalahan tersebut. Berikut ini wawancara saya bersama Wakil Menteri Perdagangan Amerika Serikat dan Kepala Badan Kelautan dan Atmosfer Nasional Amerika Serikat, Richard Spinrad, dalam program The Ambassador.
Hi Rick, how are you doing?
I'm fine, Teddy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming, and it's such a pleasure for us to having you here in Indonesia.
It's my honor to be back in Indonesia and have this opportunity to have a great discussion. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you very much once again. I know that this is not your very first time here in Indonesia, but my question is, what's bring you here and what's make this trip special?
So my previous trips to Indonesia, I was coming with very specific activities or agreements because I was in charge of different parts of NOAA. Now I'm in charge of the whole organization, and we have an incredible set of responsibilities around environment, around climate, and you can't do work around climate without having strong collaborations with key partners. And Indonesia has historically been a wonderful partner to the United States in general. We're celebrating 75 years of cooperation between our countries, and in science specifically, and in environmental science, oceanography, climatology, meteorology, the ability to have agreements to collect data, the ability to develop new capabilities for predicting the weather or understanding fisheries depends on personal relationships and engagements. So I came here on this trip in order to reinvigorate some of those partnerships and the scientific collaboration that we've had for many decades between Indonesia and the United States.
Okay, thank you for giving us the answer. You talked about the collaboration before. So my next question is, could you explain to us the main focus of the collaboration between NOAA and Indonesian government?
So the short answer to your question about the main focus is environment, but it gets much more specific. So we've had a relationship. In fact, I signed an agreement, a fisheries agreement with KKP about 15 or 20 years ago. So that's part of the relationship, talking about how we can collaborate on things like illegal, unreported, unregulated fisheries, IUU fisheries we call it. But there's more. There's more in the environmental area. So we all care about plastics in the ocean. So what can we do together to solve the problem of plastics? And then there's the issue of climate. Here in Indonesia, you're seeing it every day in terms of changes in precipitation. You're seeing it in terms of sea level rise. And so consequently, how do we work together to make measurements out in the middle of the ocean or in the atmosphere to be able to do the next generation the responsibility that we have to provide better information that they can use to make decisions.
For better life.
For a better life. We talk about lives,
Right.
livelihoods, and lifestyles,
Right, yeah.
and it's about all of those.
Well, our media, liputan6.com, is a one-off media in Indonesia who also focus on climate change. We have a climate project. So it is the effort for building the awareness for Indonesian people about climate issue. And one of the top program name is Climate Talk, which is the sharing session with Indonesian student, and also it's for to make discuss more inclusive and then also grounded. So my question is, did NOAA have a similar campaign like us, especially for young people?
We do. We don't call it by a particular name like that, but we realized a few years ago that the only way that we could get the support from our government to do the work we needed to do was if the American population recognized how important it was. And we learned early on that young people are particularly passionate, particularly well-informed about climate issues. So we've developed a number of programs to engage the youth of America in trying to help us develop our priorities for future research, new programs, new predictions that we can use. But we've had success with all of the population in the United States getting smarter about how climate affects all of them. And I think it's safe to say now that almost all folks in the United States understand how climate change is affecting their wallet or their safety or their community. And young people have been a critical part of that.
Included, right?
Absolutely.
And also, I hope that not only American and also Indonesian, but young generation in the world can have a one voice for our environment.
Absolutely. I would say so. Every year I go to the big United Nations Climate Conference. We call it the COP. And so at every one of these COP conferences, there are youth groups from all over the world. That's what's really exciting. So young people, from mostly early teens to college age, from every country in the world, advocating for more research, more investment in addressing the problems of climate change.
Right, that's a good news, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Well, for the next question is climate change is a hot topic nowadays, and it's included in one of the top priorities from U.S. government and maybe also Indonesian government in our side. Could you please tell us what the NOAA top agenda about it and what effort have been made for it, and especially related to Indonesia, and what do you expect for our country?
So the short answer to your question is my top priority is something called building a climate-ready nation. So this concept of climate-ready nation means that we understand what climate change is going to do to every part of our society, agriculture, transportation, economics. We understand it so well and we can predict it so well that we can actually adapt to it. So if you're a farmer and you know that you're not going to be able to plant wheat the same time every year because of climate change, we can tell you how to plant it better. And that's not only in the United States. Every nation, every citizen of the world is going to be affected by climate change. So for us to create a climate-ready nation, we have to be a climate-ready world. And that's the discussion we're having with partners. So the citizens of Indonesia, what do they care about most in terms of how climate change is going to affect them? The folks who live close to the coast, they care a lot about sea level rise. Other people care about how storms might change. And so consequently, what we learn, we can share. What Indonesian scientists learn can be shared with other scientists around the world. We all have the same challenge to become a climate-ready world.
So the key is everybody should be ready, because we already facing the hardest time, for example, when COVID-19 happened, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a very good analogy, because everybody realized that we had to solve the problem of COVID internationally. We all work together. And the same thing is true with climate change. We all have to work together. The best scientists, doesn't matter where they are, need to develop the best predictions for solving the problem. And the best policymakers need to be able to look around and say, hey, what are they doing in Indonesia? What are they doing in France? What are they doing in the United States? And come to solution through collaboration.
Nice, that's nice. So I also want to go through the next question. Before, the NOAA confirmed that the world is currently experiencing a global coral bleaching event. This is the fourth global event on record and the second in the last 10 years. As we know that Indonesia is at the center of coral triangle. Could you please explain to us, maybe in a simple way, what does it mean, the coral bleaching, and what triggered this cause?
So I'll start by saying that on one of my last trips to Indonesia, I was up in Manado going skin diving, looking at the corals. So I understand how much the coral ecosystem is, how important it is to Indonesia. Coral bleaching basically means that the corals, which are made of hard parts as well as soft animals that live in the coral, when the temperature gets too high, those animals die. And so all that's left is just the hard part, the white part, and that's why it's called coral bleaching. The next thing that happens, if it continues even longer and longer, the coral dies. That's obviously a very, very stressful thing. But the changes that we're seeing from the warming of the oceans is that we're seeing dramatic coral bleachings all around the world.
So the next question, still from the NOAA report, who already said the coral bleaching, especially giving the big impact for this world, such as to our economies, livelihood, food security, and also many more. Would you mind telling us how this phenomenon affect human life directly and what we can do to prevent it?
Yeah, so there's a number of different ways to address that question. One is on food security, right? That seafood provides protein for a lot of people around the world. If we lose the corals, the coral reefs, they're part of the ecosystem. They also serve as places where small fish can grow, where we can develop whole populations of fish. They are a critical part of healthy oceans. You lose a part of the healthy ocean, you could lose the fish, which means there could be fewer fish for people to rely on for food security. So all of the ecosystem is connected. The loss of any part of it is going to have an impact on things like food security for the world.
Right. So still talking about the climate change, how do NOAA predict the future? It is going to be getting worse, or we still have a hope? And what is your message to the world?
So my first part of the message is I'm an optimist about climate change. It is happening. It will continue to happen. We're taking steps to reduce our fossil fuel emissions so that we can mitigate, reduce the warming. But we also have to adapt and become resilient. And the reason I'm optimistic is because I know how well we're developing predictions. So we can tell people how much sea level is going to rise. We can tell people how much the water is going to warm, how the atmosphere is going to warm. And if we know that, we can adapt. We can make changes to how we protect the ocean, how we fish sustainably from the ocean, how we take advantage of the changes in the ocean and learn to adapt to them. Moving whole communities, for example, is an example of how to do that. So I'm optimistic because I think science is at the key to our being able to become resilient to climate change.
Yeah, me too. I'm very optimistic. Mr. Richard Spinrad, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you have a great time here, especially this year we're entering the 75 years of relationship, Indonesia and United States. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure and honor. Thank you.